Hello, honeys, and welcome to our second to the last Beesness of the year 2025, recapping for you in the shortest and sweetest possible way the best of the arts world headlines from the last week, December 14th through the 20th. A quick reminder before we begin, this is our second to the last Beesness of the year, but we do still have one more 5-minute musical coming out. And guess what? In the spirit of the season, we've decided to make that final 5-minute musical of the year free and available to you on all of your regular streaming platforms. And now let's begin for the day. A few updates to get us started here. After nearly 2 decades of legal challenges and escalating local opposition, plans to build a €100 million two-site expansion of the Guggenheim Bilbao in Spain's protected Urdaibai Biosphere Reserve have been abandoned. The museum's Board of Trustees, the Basque Regional Government, the Biscay Provincial Council, and the Solomon R. Guggenheim Foundation all voted this week to halt the project aimed at revitalizing the struggling Busturialdea region, citing insufficient public support and scientific objections. Last week also saw 96% of LACMA's workers vote to unionize under the auspices of AFSCME Cultural Workers United District Council 36 on December 15th and 16th in an election facilitated by the American Arbitration Association and approved by the National Labor Relations Board. The new union, LACMA United, includes about 300 workers from across all departments of the institution, including curation, administration, education, and art handling. And a moment of unavoidable explicit language here, Pussy Riot has been classified as an extremist organization by the Russian Ministry of Justice. The punk rock collective received that designation, banning all their activities on Russian soil on December 15th, following a ruling by Moscow's Tverskoy District Court presided over by Judge Maria Moskalenko. And it follows a long and bitter history between the judge and the collective. The why we care here, honeys, of course, is the aspect of free speech. The ruling effectively bans all activities of the collective within Russia, painting the protest group as a threat to national security, but it also, writes our sources, quote, carries severe consequences for supporters, as owning a signature balaclava, possessing a Pussy Riot song, or quote-unquote liking a social media post could now result in prison time, end quote. And now for our new headlines. Artists, musicians, cultural workers, and local politicians gathered in New York City's Federal Hall, where the Bill of Rights was introduced, to defend artistic rights in the U.S. under the rallying cry, quote, "The First Amendment was born here, we will not let it die here," end quote, also on December 15th. The action was co-organized by the National Coalition Against Censorship, New Yorkers for Arts and Culture, and the First Amendment Culture Team. One participant was Karen Finley, a member of a quartet of performance artists, aka the NEA 4, who sued the National Endowment for the Arts in the early 1990s after their grants were revoked owing to a quote-unquote decency clause instituted by a Republican-led Congress at the time. She sees the Supreme Court's later ruling in favor of the NEA's decision-making process denying their grant as a precedent to today's practice of, quote, books being banned, what's happening at universities with research funding, and in terms of healthcare, whether it's trans healthcare or reproductive rights, end quote. Said Lee Rowland, executive director of the National Coalition Against Censorship, in a statement requoted by Art Forum, quote, "When the government targets art or artists for political reasons, every American should be alarmed. We stand with New York's cultural community in defending the First Amendment," end quote. And in exciting news for us art nerds, a short film by artist Alexander Singh and art historian Natalie Mostieta was shortlisted for an Oscar. The 36-minute-long black-and-white film's premise is that kissing and all other forms of intimacy have been forbidden and made punishable by death. The film premiered at the Telluride Film Festival earlier this year and has been making the rounds ever since, winning various prizes and honors at festivals and also being shortlisted for a 2026 César Award, often referred to as a quote-unquote French Oscar. We wish the pair luck. However, last week also came with the news that the quote-unquote Victims of Communism Memorial in Canada will leave off names after findings have linked some to Nazism. Ottawa's Memorial to the Victims of Communism was first approved in 2009 and has since accumulated a budget of around $5.4 million, with all but $1 million of that covered by public funds. But concern over the links between some of the planned names and troubling aspects of the past was first raised by Jewish groups and Canadian media enterprises who connected more than half of the proposed 550 individuals to Nazism or fascist groups in claims made last year and which were later corroborated by the Department of Canadian Heritage, according to the Art newspaper. This evidence prompted the department to change course and go with, quote, more general thematic content, end quote, instead of inscribing the memorial with specific so-called victim names. Meanwhile, the Museo de Arte Latinoamericano de Buenos Aires announced also on December 15th that its founder, real estate developer Eduardo F. Constantini, purchased the Daros Latin America collection, which is made up of 1,233 works, most created between the 1950s and the 2010s, and was formerly kept in Zurich. This is big important news, honeys, because it more than doubles the size of both MALBA's and Constantini's modern and contemporary Latin American art collections, making it one of the world's largest at about 3,000. We're excited to see what the museum will do with all these new paintings, sculptures, photos, videos, and large-scale installations, because the acquisition also, according to Artforum, quote, signifies the return of major Latin American works from Switzerland, and we'll see works by artists from Costa Rica, Honduras, Jamaica, Panama, and the Dominican Republic enter the museum for the first time, end quote. We also heard that Libya's National Museum has reopened after 14 years. Asaraya al-Hamra, or the Red Castle Museum, quote, a symbol of Libya's ancient layered history with a foundation dating to the Roman era and significant expansions undertaken across the centuries, end quote, according to Art News, has reopened in Tripoli for the first time since the 2011 revolution that ended the 4-decade rule of Muammar al-Gaddafi. Renovations of the museum began in 2023, and while students have exclusive admission opportunities for now, the official public reopening date is set for early 2026. We're featuring this news, honeys, because it is the largest museum in the North African country and was a featured part of Libya's chapter of the Arab Spring. Gaddafi delivered an impassioned vow to defeat the NATO-backed insurgency from the castle's ramparts, but was ultimately overthrown and executed in late October 2011 by Libyan rebel forces. However, London's Barbican will shutter for a year during its own $230 million renovation. That announcement was preceded by the City of London Corporation's approval of a £191 million investment in the centre's 5-year renovation plan to make quote-unquote major improvements to the arts hub, foyers, terrace, and conservatory. Renovations will begin in 2027, so the projected completion date of 2032 will coincide with the Barbican's 50th anniversary. The institution has said it will continue to collaborate on programming with partners, associate companies, and festivals even while it's closed. And it seems we really can't go a single week without reporting on the Louvre. This time, its staff unions voted to continue a strike 2 days into their walkout. AP News reports that unionized staff voted unanimously on Wednesday to continue their strike that began with a walkout Monday in protest over, quote, increasingly deteriorated working conditions, end quote. As of December 17th, about 400 of the 2,100 total staff members represented by 4 trade unions are participating. The Louvre was closed on Monday and Tuesday of last week and partially open Wednesday as a result. And our sources say that union officials have found offers from the Ministry of Culture to cancel a planned €5.7 million or $6.7 million budget cut in 2026 to recruit more gallery guards and visitor services staff and to raise staff pay insufficient. The striking staff is also opposing the non-EU visitor ticket prices hike. Art News writes that their December 8th letter notifying the Ministry of Culture of their intent to strike argues that the dual pricing system, quote, tramples on our Republican history and the founding universalism of the Louvre Museum, end quote. They similarly oppose the use of funds from a brand licensing arrangement with Abu Dhabi, estimated at £480 million or $564 million, to overhaul traffic-heavy parts of the museum instead of renovating and repairing almost all of it. We'll continue with more coverage of the strikes into next week. We also heard about a legal challenge that was filed after Texas State University canceled a Black History 101 mobile museum visit. Quote, Black History 101 Mobile Museum is a traveling exhibition of thousands of Black cultural objects amassed by Dr. Khalid al-Hakim, spanning centuries of U.S. history from the transatlantic slave trade through the civil rights era and into the present, end quote, writes Art News. According to the museum's website, the collection offers, quote, physical encounters, end quote, with the objects and has visited over 1,000 institutions across 43 states since its launch in the 90s, with the mission of establishing a, quote, safe space for open and honest discussions surrounding race and social justice, end quote. According to a report by the University Star, Texas State's student-run paper, the decision to cancel the mobile museum's visit, scheduled for 2026 Black History Month, has resulted in a First Amendment suit by the ACLU of Texas. Jamie Blaschke, assistant director for the Office of Media Relations at Texas State, said that the cancellation notice sent to Dr. al-Hakim did not blame the statewide DEI ban. However, Blaschke did not explain the reasoning behind the decision. The DEI ban at Texas public universities itself results from a 2023 Senate bill, and the ACLU of Texas speculates that in addition to, quote, the current climate of our state, end quote, and, quote, certain topics covered as part of the museum, end quote, were the reasons for rescinding the invitation to Dr. al-Hakim in its own letter sent to Texas State President Kelly Damphouse. The organization went on to argue, quote, canceling this event based on viewpoint not only violates the First Amendment, but also stifles free speech on campus to the detriment of Texas State's students, faculty, staff, and visitors, end quote. Blaschke went on to say that the university will consider extending another invitation to the Black History 101 Mobile Museum to visit the campus for a future Black History Month programming event, but did not elaborate on the details of that possibility. We noticed this headline, honeys, because the Texas state government has exerted a growing amount of control, of influence over local arts and education in recent years, with the second most recent example being, of course, the Sally Mann photo controversy at the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth. Last week also saw Trump reappoint Mary Ann Carter as the NEA Chair. Carter, the same political operative who served in the post during Trump's first term, was confirmed by Senate vote along party lines, a 53-43 margin. One of the interesting parts of this story, honeys, is that she was nominated in May, a moment of extreme turmoil at the National Endowment of the Arts as senior leaders left en masse. Hundreds of art organizations were receiving mass emails saying that their promised NEA grants were cut because they supposedly did not align with the new administration's priorities, etc. Carter has a modest list of achievements from her first term. She for sure negotiated budget increases for 4 straight years and also claims that she expanded outreach to underserved communities, strengthening relationships with U.S. governors, mayors, chambers of commerce, and leaders in the medical field. But our Why We Care is best summarized by Art News, who says, quote, in keeping with his tendency to appoint agency heads who either lack the subject matter expertise or are openly hostile to the missions they are meant to support, Trump has reappointed a controversial pick with no other professional experience in the arts and a record as a reliable supporter of Republican politicians. Carter also worked in the 1990s for the Heritage Foundation, the right-wing think tank that authored Project 2025, the extremist policy blueprint that has shaped Trump's second term, end quote. And that's not all. The Kennedy Center Board also voted last week to add Trump to the embattled institution's name. After the Board of Trustees vote on Thursday to add Donald Trump's name to the institution that he has roiled since taking office in January, questions were immediately raised about the legality and the morality of such a thing. According to our sources, this decision, quote, was met with disapproval from members of Kennedy's family and legal experts who say it goes against a stipulation put in place after Congress renamed the center in the wake of JFK's assassination in 1963, end quote. Meanwhile, Joe Kennedy III, a former congressman and the great-nephew of the late president, wrote on X, quote, the Kennedy Center is a living memorial to a fallen president and named for President Kennedy by federal law. It can no sooner be renamed than can someone rename the Lincoln Memorial, no matter what anyone says, end quote. Plus, the claim of a unanimous vote in favor of the name change made by spokeswoman Roma Daravi was disputed by Democratic representative and ex officio member of the board, Joyce Beatty, who said, quote, I was on that call, and as I tried to push my button to voice my concern, to ask questions, and certainly not to vote in support of this, I was muted. Each time I tried to speak, I was muted, end quote. And ending things on a more neutral note here, honeys, Sony has bought a majority stake in the Peanuts comics for $457 million US. Sony's music and movie arms signed a quote-unquote definitive agreement with WildBrain, who the Tech and Media Corporation got its first shares from, in an official transaction. According to their joint statement, the deal brings Sony's existing 39% stake up to 80%, while the Schultz family will continue to own the remaining 20% of Peanuts Holdings, LLC. And that is our super brief holiday season Beesness. I hope you've enjoyed. I'm not going to waste any more time talking your ear off. I have family to get back to. Here's hoping that you are with yours as well, or at least friends, neighbors, chosen family, anyone who makes you feel welcome this holiday season. Take care, stay warm, hydrate or dehydrate, and we will all talk next week. This podcast is created and produced by yours truly, Celia Bugno, who also obviously hosted as well as fact-checked, researched, and edited this episode. Shout out to Chris Meinhold for our intro and outro music. Remember to give us a like, follow, comment, subscribe wherever you stream and on our social medias.